Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Live. I'm Christopher Ludwig, Editor-in-Chief here at Ultima Media and Automotive Logistics. Great to have so many of you back. And for those of you just joining us, we've got a great session ahead of us here, capping off a magnificent first day, if I don't say so myself, full of content, looking at the transformation happening across the supply chain in the wake of COVID, in the context of digital transformation, in the context of electrification, and so many other aspects coming into it. Really been jam-packed full, and we're going to be finishing the day really on a strong note as well. The focus of our session today is leadership in a time of adversity. I think it's fair to say that crises demand much of us, whether it's our time, maybe our blood, sweat, money, and certainly no shortage of tears as well. But they certainly also demand leadership. And that's no different, and especially so in the terms of supply chain. And that's whether it's leadership in terms of guiding our teams and supporting our staff, serving our customers, and also making difficult decisions as well. And I think when we look into the supply chain at this time, this has obviously been critical, whether it's looking at the data and understanding how we need to react, and also importantly, trying to motivate our teams, keep people connected, and moving in the right direction at a time when obviously things were and in many ways remain unclear. As we talked about throughout various points of the day, I think this is a challenge in which the supply chain, the automotive supply chain, has met in many cases, but we do need to look beyond the crisis, and I think that's an important aspect now, so that we're not constantly in reactive mode. And so what we've done to cap off our day today is put together a panel of senior leaders and decision makers in the automotive industry in different parts of the supply chain and the value chain to discuss the topic. And so I'm really pleased to welcome and to invite to join me on the screen. We'll hear from Susanne Lehmann, who's the Senior Director of Production North America at Volkswagen in Volkswagen de Mexico, playing a very key role there in the coordinating production and indeed in supply chain and logistics too. Emmanuel Arnaud is a member of the management board and executive vice president at Gefco, an important global logistics provider, and certainly helping to oversee the key aspects of this global business. Raman Mehta, who's the Chief Information Officer and Vice President at Visteon, another very important Tier 1 in the midst of its own digital transformation, and Raman as CIO, of course, playing such an important role in the infrastructure and systems that connect that together. And also so pleased to have with us Marc Brazeau, Head of Logistics at Fiat Chrysler North America, overseeing the company's North American supply chain management logistics operation, and certainly someone many in our audience know, and very glad to have you connected with us here today as well, Marc. So thanks and welcome to all of our panel.
Thanks, Chris.
Great to have you here. So let's just jump in. So a reminder to our audience, we're going to be having a lively panel discussion here, which I'll moderate. But there are, as throughout the event, please put through your questions, comments, and let us know what questions you'd like to put to the panel, and I'll feed them through as we go. So let's start with the universal challenge pretty much in every industry right now, and for many leaders in the wake of this crisis, and that was in fact adapting to managing remote operations. And there's aspects of the supply chain which can be managed remotely. There's operations which certainly probably can't be, but it would be good to just kind of get a grounding from everyone on how you've done that and effectively how it's progressed in this sort of stage of the crisis as well, in terms of how it's looking today. So maybe we can start with Marc from FCA in terms of connecting the teams remotely in that way.
So our experience with the shutdown, as everyone else, I'm sure experienced the same thing. The automotive industry doesn't like shutting anything down, and when it became clear that we would have to shut down or consider a shutdown, the interesting part was, we have a history of being able to use our downtime. Every manufacturer has scheduled downtime. Obviously not for the period of time that we've had, but we all use that constructively. And And with the benefit of having the plants go down for a period of time, it allowed us to deploy our teams in a way that was the most effective for, one, creating an orderly shutdown, two, addressing the health and safety and security of not just our employees, but our extended suppliers and our extended partners that operate with us. And then three, just as importantly, begin planning for what an orderly startup would look like. So we're very proud of the work that our team did, and our suppliers and the plant personnel. That the day that we knew that we were leaving the office for the last time for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we really didn't have a sort of an end date. There really was a sort of a concerted effort or concerted plan to make sure that everyone on our team had access to the right technology, had the ability to take the tools that they had in their offices home in order to establish workspaces that was effective for them. And so on the logistics side or the supply chain side, and the transportation piece, for the most part, a lot of our teams are used to working remotely anyways. They're in the field. Our supply base is in the field. So it didn't feel foreign for us to sort of send everybody to remote locations and then work based on sort of a contingency plan. But the areas where it really required some thought and planning really then had to do with how do we interact with the plant as they were shutting down? How do we interact with our suppliers as they were reacting to the shutdowns? And the ripple effect of every plant and every manufacturer having a different schedule for shutting down over the course of a week or so. And I think that's where that's where we really were able to shine as a team standpoint, is that as we shut down, we redeployed IT resources to support the areas that were immediately affected by working remotely, that weren't used to working remotely. So where we didn't need the resources immediately in the plants, we were able to reallocate those resources to supporting every other area that needed to learn how to work remotely. And then we turned collectively our efforts to, okay, what do we know about the crisis? What do we know about the different state, federal, and in some cases global constraints that we may have for starting up eventually? And then what do we have to address in the time that we're down to make sure that we have an approach for an orderly, safe startup? So I think we used, as most of our supply base and most of the other OEMs used the downtime effectively. If you just look at how the industry came back up in mid-June, at least in North America, it was pretty impressive to see how quickly everybody came up. We're certainly proud of the work that we did on our startup without having any delays or any being able to meet our launch curve. So effectively treating it like a long scheduled shutdown and doing all the maintenance activities, all of the additional safety protocol and activities, and setting up those guidelines, not just at our locations, but with our suppliers, working deeply and directly with our suppliers, on top of being able to provide charitable capacity and charitable support for resources to the different municipalities, state and federal level crisis management organizations.
Thanks, Marc. Maybe if I just turn to Susanne on that kind of briefly, also from production and not least as well being in Mexico and managing it there. So was that experience similar? And maybe what I would add is, did it in the production side, was it also a question of looking and using additional tools, digital tools, for example, to plan and move forward on this side as well?
Yes, of course, we are using a lot of visualization and simulation tools to plan production, to plan every single workstation in order to be safe, also in the outbound operations. But what is our task at this moment in time is look also at the markets, which markets are already up again, and what can we use in our production in order to really build the right cars. Not just building it from the latest orders that we have in a FIFO scheme, but really looking at the markets and doing what is necessary to have the right production schedules now. This is, I think, really challenging, and I think we are doing quite well at the moment. And thanks also to my team. I don't know who is listening, but thanks to all, also including the suppliers, Raman and etc., that are really helping us in a very flexible way, simulating these very flexible production schemes at the moment.
It's an interesting point and something that came up in some of our earlier discussions, that aspect of, I mean, in this restart mode, producing the right product, obviously for the right place, and having the inventory positioned. And so it's interesting when you say that these simulation tools have been quite essential in that.
Yes, of course, because if you just look at FIFO, for example, we would produce a lot of Brazilian cars at the moment, which the market is not ready to take. Meanwhile, the US-American market, also for both production sites, including Chattanooga, is really pulling. So how can we really rearrange everything, including parts, including production facilities, including outbound, to change nearly weekly, on a weekly basis. My colleagues are hating me a little bit now, but I think it's also leadership to do things that are not liked by everybody, but necessary at this moment in time.
It's a good job you thanked them, so we do then acknowledge them from working here, for those who are watching. Maybe I'll turn to Emmanuel from Gefco's point of view and the logistics provider. So, adapting to the new normal, as we kind of call it, from Gefco's point of view, obviously working remotely, but also perhaps especially looking at things like productivity and making improvements in that. Maybe you can give us some perspective there.
Thanks, Chris. I think it's interesting to share experience with people not only around the supply chain, OEM side, tier one supplier side, LSPs, but also around the globe, because probably we have lived a different period of confinement, lockdown, and so on, depending on the geographies. Actually, I think we've been, from our side, first trying to secure the teams, and to ensure that as long as production could run, we supported the supply and the evacuation of the factories with finished cars. And it's been a challenge because initially people were quite scared from health and safety perspective. So we had to reassure a lot from the office to the shop floor to the drivers. Just remember being on the call with some executive of one of the European French-based OEM wanted to pick up harnesses for batteries at the very beginning of the crisis in Italy, in the first city which was locked down, and this was vital for their production. So obviously there was a lot to do on the management of the potential shortage of production, but also in talking to the driver who actually went and picked up in this red zone these harnesses. So all that is part of what we managed at the beginning, and then we started to be in a kind of hypercare mode, hypervigilance, talking a lot to the people. We have started to apply some short-time employment for some of the staff, but still we have continued to talk to them and to let them know what was the situation of the company, just in case we would need them to come back to support a restart. And actually, we've been planning not one, but several restarts, because as the pandemic was developing, there were some hypotheses of restart, and every time we try to support with a plan on how to restart inbound, how to restart collections, how to deliver what was in the pipe. And as it was rightly pointed by Susanne, I guess, not everything that we had in our trucks already loaded was corresponding to what was expected at the factory for production. So that also required a kind of agility. And probably the last point to address from your question is about productivity. Depending on the operation, obviously, the restart mode has created some shortages. So obviously, we had to implement some time-critical supplies, which are normally things that we only perform when there is an emergency caused by a delay in supply. But in that case, it was a shortage due to the adaptation of the production film or production planning in some cases. The other one was probably on the finished vehicle logistics side, where in the workshops, we had a lot to do to adapt the work of the people to the new normal, what you call the new normal. Just take one example. We have at Gefco, we have a lot of compounds and car stores on this compound, and we have jockeys going around to pick up the cars on the compounds. And actually, with the norms at the beginning, we had to change the shuttle management of these drivers, and where we could have up to 8 people traveling around the compound together to pick up cars, we had to reduce down to 3. And this was awful, because at the beginning we were multiplying the number of shuttles and we are not finding our way. So we have had to redesign the setup of the compounds just to minimize the time that people were losing in this shuttle. So just take this one example, which is very pragmatic down to the shop floor, which is something that today we are adapting and basically following the evolution of the government and health organization recommendation, just to get to the optimal between safety of the people and productivity, having in mind that safety first, and we don't want to trade off towards productivity.
Fascinating insight there into how a logistics provider reacts to its operations there. I want to turn to Raman Mehta from Visteon, from the CIO perspective, perhaps a little bit of a different turn there, because clearly the world turned to remote working. And your team, Visteon, would of course been relying on many systems to continue to work. And you as a CIO, I imagine in many ways the buck stops with you on this side. So can you talk to us a little bit about how to make that, ensure that it's fit for purpose, safe, secure, and functioning, and what changes you may have had to have done to react in that way?
Definitely, Chris, and glad to be here. Let me share some of the practical lessons that we've learned. And I would say, and when we talk about the new normal, or I fondly call it sometimes new abnormal, right? We're all getting used to it now. And our journey began probably a couple of years back. And when people think of a tier 1 automotive, the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of hardware, devices. But we were already in the middle of a software-centric transformation. More and more of our products, the bill of materials, have software component inbuilt into it. We work a lot into cockpit electronics. It's all about infotainment, the driver experience, which is completely, people are expecting to have the same experience that you have in the consumer electronics world. So we were already getting warmed up to collaborative working, remote working. What COVID did to us was really accelerate that journey, And one thing I remember fondly, a year back, we had heavily invested into what I call the SD-WAN technology, which kind of makes your network reside on the cloud. And that gave us a very good jump start on the adoption of tools like Microsoft Teams. What we did during this COVID, we said, well, why don't we even change our business practices? Why are we relying so much on the emails? Can we start collaborating into open spaces where the benefit of that accrued knowledge is much, much bigger than getting logged into the emails? So that helped us a lot. Now you're right, it brought a lot of security, cybersecurity considerations into the mix. If you watch the headlines, the ransomware, the spyware, the social engineering, all of these things kind of exploded during this time. As a CIO, you want to keep the teams productive because you don't have the luxury of giving everybody a trusted device. Now from home, people can bring their own devices, they can log into your network. So all the safety that you built around a data center or a premise of a company has to be rethought. So we invested heavily into it. And just to give the journey, at this point, we are looking into technologies that we are rolling out, what I call zero trust networks. Meaning when you're working from home, you're not even on the VPN and you're still connected to some of the systems that are internal to employees. It has been a big journey, and the investment that we made a year to 18 months back absolutely paid off. It became a discussion with the CEO, the board, and IT with our engagement and keeping people informed. We really came out with flying colors, and I will share a few more lessons as we go along.
Fantastic. Yeah, indeed. That's, I mean, you know, COVID for some has been a digital accelerator, but I think it also has exposed probably the gaps for some companies, right? So those who hadn't done some of that work ahead of time were likely to potentially have fallen behind. Maybe just a quick follow up on that. If we turn it to the supply chain a little bit, you know, in terms of where that infrastructure or those systems were they also in place there to support things like visibility and sort of network, so network visibility and visualizations like Susanne was outlining.
Right. Some of them were in place. What we had people call good dashboards. To me, dashboards are things of the past now. You need to have the insights where people can take actions in real time. Those are actionable data stories. I think Emmanuel pointed out in January, February, we were all running when China was under big stress, and a lot of our supply chain was based in China. So our challenge was how quickly to shut down things. And things were in transit. How do you get the real visibility? So a person sitting on a supply chain control center has got to know in real time what are the alternate sources of supply, what's in the transit. You know, you just cannot rely on discrete data points. You need continuous data flow from the supplier shipments all the way to your docks and things moving to the customers. So we accelerated that journey and really started talking about a digital twin in the supply network. What are the key KPIs at each plant? How are these plants different? What is causing that difference because of the supply chain disruption? So that thing was a big help. Second thing that has happened now is the digital threads. Our CEO was able to break it down into very simple imperatives that right from our design to bill of material on the engineering side, how do you take that journey so that you're not locking the key data into spreadsheets and having a continuous view of your bill of material as it goes from design to manufacturing to shipment to service. And that gives you a lot of capabilities to simulate things. And that became a CFO, CEO discussion. And now they are more than willing to invest in those technologies and really work with IT because they know that we know the tools, we have the technology, and above all, we have a 360-degree view of the business process. So a lot of good things have come out of this bad situation for us.
Yeah, just maybe while we're on that point, maybe if I can bring Marc or Susanne into the conversation there. I'm sure that some of what Raman is outlined there are things that either your companies aspire to do or are aiming to do. And you know, Marc, do you see you know, as someone leading this organization, you know, COVID as this opportunity to go a bit faster in some of those areas, to get some of that connectivity and visualization that Raman was outlining, you know, into the supply chain as we for a long time spoken about?
Yeah, I think that's been the silver lining behind this crisis. And I tell people, you know, had we shut down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, which frankly was the original concession that I think the industry was looking for, that, yeah, I'd be happy to shut down for a couple of weeks as long as we can come back up. I don't know that we would have learned anything. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that Raman's points about increasing the pace of understanding within our individual organizations of the value of digital transformation, particularly in areas where we've said for years that digital transformation is really lends itself to early adoption. The supply chain is one of those areas, particularly the logistics and transportation pieces. But as Raman mentioned, as we push back into the manufacturing side and then further down into the supply base, tier one and tier ends below that, I think what we learned and what we've been able to show through this pandemic is that, one, we've developed communication processes in order to properly run through the pandemic. Two, had we had some of the digital tools or some of the things that we've been talking about from a digital transformation, moving away from control towers to more of predictive data management and business intelligence, and that allow us to then create a framework to establish business learning and algorithms around the things and decisions that we make. The digital twin at the supply chain level. This really showed our organizations that, hey, we need to be looking at this in a way that's much more with much more urgency, because we don't know what the next disruption is going to be. So, to amplify that, the communication process between us and our suppliers and our partners really changed the way we communicated to not just internally, but to our supply base. As an example, when we shut down, gone were the traditional hour-and-a-half meetings internally to discuss things. We really moved to a more sprint-related half-hour teleconference format of communicating with our own teams. That made our communications internally more timely, more effective in terms of making decisions. But then it also brought us closer to our supply base. And as we planned the shutdown, we included the suppliers, both the manufacturing suppliers as well as the supply chain suppliers, in more of these quick meetings and these sprint meetings. And I think that's a big takeaway, that if we can communicate with the tools that we have today and the emerging tools around teleconferencing, what could we do with better digital information in front of us moving forward, and more available data to make better decisions, or to have predictive support in making those decisions ahead of time? I think that's what everyone has really identified as being the opportunity coming out of this, and I think we finally got to a point where there's a high degree of support within the industry, not even just within the individual companies. I mean, we all recognize that our success in relaunching our plants really is born in the success of our interaction with our tier 1 and tier 2 supply base. At the end of the day, we could be ready to build and assemble whatever we want to do, but if our suppliers aren't ready, as Susanne pointed out earlier, if our order book isn't stable, if our build plan isn't stable, if we introduce an awful lot of variability, then suppliers can't react in the middle of a crisis that way effectively. So we had to work with them based on their constraints to be able to identify what build plan we had to establish for a firm build in 4 and 8 week increments to allow us to stabilize the supply chain. And as we're seeing the demand curve, at least in North America, being so strong and healthy, those activities that Susanne pointed out earlier, that Raman described in terms of digital transformation, and then what I'm explaining in terms of better communication in smaller spurts, that's what contributed to our ability to successfully launch without having to shut down again because of a supplier failure. High degree of communication that changed the way we traditionally worked in silos even just 6 months ago. So it is exciting to see what we carry forward in terms of lessons learned, and more importantly, how do we establish a digital transformation path that not only helps us individually, but pushes the industry forward.
Some very interesting points there from a organization and work culture point of view, and maybe I can turn to Susanne on that, and then I want to go to some audience questions because they go in this direction as well. What Marc was outlining there in some ways is pointing towards, you know, the move towards a more agile organization, right, in terms of the work processes and supported by those digital tools. I think that's been a big topic for Volkswagen as a group, but I wonder, you know, from your point of view in the production on the shop floor and dealing with it on that, is that, you know, how far along are we? Are you now, and where do you kind of see the room to take that next step, you know, to become more agile on the production side?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, because I think we are organized pretty well on a worldwide basis in Volkswagen. So, for example, as you have mentioned, the Chinese suppliers in February were our biggest concern. Then shifting, of course, to US suppliers at the moment for the ramp up. I think it has also been mentioned, Marc, we had to do that together, and we still have to do that together. So I think this is running, but what else can we do to, for example, really get also the political influence, to get digital tools running? Really, dashboards are old-fashioned. It's also what I share, what Raman said. How can we really get an online simulation or tools where really people can make the right decisions? And also link that with the political influence. So can I see how can I get the engines for other market cars, for example? And can I see how fast I can get them? How much money does it cost? How much productivity perhaps I will lose because I'm changing my production schedules? All these are questions that we all have to attack together, and together with the supplier base. And this is something that is a challenge that we still have in the North American region. So thanks for allowing me to raise that topic. But my big question is, how can we really make sure that every element of the supply chain, including logistics suppliers, including those suppliers that have a workforce that is receiving money from governmental helps and prefers staying at home, can be included in all these simulation and discussions. This is something that I really want to share with you and bring into the discussion here.
Well, let's do that then, because you're obviously raising quite, I think, what seems to be a key issue particularly, and appreciate it's perhaps specific to some on the panel more than others, but this issue which has come up a few times as well. There's a struggle when we talk about leadership and when we talk about the workforce, actually, in parts of this region, to get the workforce going again, isn't there?
Question to me, or
no, just because you raised that, so just to kind of unpick that a little bit.
How can we be attractive enough to have people come to work where we need the workforce, and perhaps also change to more digitalization, to more automation when necessary? This is also an effect that I'm looking at the moment, because we say that we cannot totally influence all the factors necessary to really control the situation. It's what I want to do, but it's really still a challenge. I would be interested, Marc, how you see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, if anyone, Marc, you want to weigh in on that side, please?
Yeah, no. I think that that we've certainly seen there's a variety of challenges. One, we found that folks that don't have to be in a certain location can work from anywhere, and I think that's one of the lessons learned. That had we only been out for 2 weeks or so, we wouldn't have gotten over sort of that cultural hurdle at least within our company, and I believe within the industry as well. But we've learned that we can kind of work from anywhere, but there are roles that have to be in certain areas. There are roles that don't lend themselves to flexible work locations, plants, and as well for Gefco and some of the other service providers. We need their people on the ground, in locations, in yards, and those types of things. And I think, to Susanne's comment about coordination with policy and guidelines and how we move forward. As an example, in North America, we are struggling in certain cases, not just our industry, but with with the federal government's subsidization of the workforce. We've seen it been difficult to bring people back in a timely manner if they're making more money, with some of the subsidies that are available to them. So there's areas where we've had to struggle with our planning with our supply base, where most of our planning time has been around labor and labor availability as opposed to manufacturing capacity or even material availability, right? So as we've come out of the pandemic and we've consumed the material that we've had in our supply chains for the last 6 months, and we're restocking those, we're finding that the conversations that we have internally for some of our fixed locations, as well as with our suppliers, is how do we collectively manage labor requirements and labor pools for those folks that aren't flexible to work remotely. And I think to Suzanne's point, we agree that it's an industry issue. As we're supporting with our resources, supporting our supply base, I think as an industry, we also have to come together to identify that remote working and flexible working will not always, have everything in a manufacturing environment covered, and we'll have to cover fixed locations. We'll have to cover, fixed requirements, and I think that'll be the challenge over the next 12 months for us as a company and an industry, is how do we stabilize that, and how do we incentivize that workforce that won't be seeing the benefits of flexible work locations.
So let me bring Emmanuel from Gefco into discussion here. So Emmanuel, clearly the specific issue raised around U.S. policy, I appreciate this is not necessarily weighing on Gefco, clearly not in Europe. However, I think the topic of how to encourage people safely into work, how you deal with obviously those operations which can't be done remotely, whether it's drivers and issues that we've faced in the logistics chains for many years. Just kind of from a point of view of what as a provider you're doing to engage and promote that workforce.
Thank you, Chris. I think this is the right moment for me also to thank all the Gefco employees and colleagues who have been working, and not only Gefco, all over the industry, who've been working in this difficult period. With supplying masks from China to a bit everywhere around the globe, medical supplies. We have requested people to wake up at night just to unload planes because we needed it, and we needed them to be on there. And I think all over the industry, we have learned how to be not only resilient but also flexible and agile. Operationally speaking. Now, when it comes to the workforce and the people, the staff on the ground, I think we've been lucky here in Europe to have probably much more support than what you experience, guys, in the stateside. In France specifically, we've received a lot of support from the government in replacement of the salaries that we were not able to pay to the employees. Not all the salary has been supported by the government, but a big chunk of it for a period, and then the companies have been able to decide whether or not they wanted to complement that, just to keep people alert. At Gefco, we've made the choice for a period of time to guarantee a certain level of earnings to our colleagues, just to keep them, up to speed, and to confirm that whenever we would need them back, then we could pick up the phone and ring them so that they can come back to work. And I think this has been a key over this pandemic to have the possibility to count on the people. And I was mentioning the hypercare at the beginning. I think this was also a key factor for us to keep the link active and not to let them disconnect away from the business. And there have been plenty of opportunities for after the lockdown has softened and has been removed. While we were not having full speed of activity, there were probably the temptation for people to go somewhere else. And we have also made some choices to alternate the work. So to bring back more people with a reduced time at work, just once again to keep them active and not to let them go away from the day-to-day business. Aside of it, I would mention probably that I'm not going to travel you around the world, but I was just discussing with my colleagues in Argentina this afternoon, and we are brave enough to try to do a budget for 2021 now. And the guys in Argentina were still saying that the situation, sanitary situation, the decision of the government over there, and probably Marc, you, and also Susan from your businesses, and as well Raman from your activities in Argentina, it's still terrible. And it's been probably 6 months that people are at home, and if there is not an express need for them to travel to work, they are simply not allowed. So this is an extra challenge, because probably after half a year, it will be difficult to find them motivated and even willing to come back to work. So probably joining in these geographies the concerns of our colleagues in the US and Mexico, by the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So some definitely some major challenges there as leaders that we certainly have to face on the workforce side. We just turning to some audience questions and some of the highly voted ones here. I think it's worth certainly addressing. We have been indirectly, but one question in particular about decision making. Has decision making been centralized due to the crisis, or is each market or division responsible for its own decisions, whether that's investment, cost management, talent? So a bit of a question about how and if decision making is changing as a result of the crisis there. Maybe Raman, maybe we can just circle that one back to you in terms of the IT teams or wider in the company. Have you seen, in terms of that agile approach too, has there been any change in centralizing or decentralizing that sort of decision making?
Definitely. I think for the most part, it has become very transparent. I think one thing that we've realized, the communication and the way we communicate is kind of changing rapidly. To give an example, I used to do my all hands meeting probably once every 6 months. Now we are doing them much more often, making them more interactive and ensuring that the collaboration is happening in a very agile tool set. Same thing is done by our CEO. Now we are in real time monitoring the sentiments of the people who are attending the calls. So are we addressing the real concerns? And I think Susanne mentioned that how to bring people back to work. There's a lot of anxiety there. There are opposing forces, right? Sometimes at individual level, people are feeling that they are more productive because they're not traveling, they have everything that they need, but you have to look at the overall productivity at the enterprise level. Are we losing a step here? How do you measure those things? What are the new norms for measuring the productivity? And those decision makings have to be much, much more open. They need to be centralized, but with a lot of control at the local level, because the plants, the engineering centers, they know the ground realities as to how are they reacting, what kind of culture is there. And I think the whole thing has to be put in that perspective where you become much more transparent and collaborative.
Does anyone else from the panel have a view on whether that's been similar for their organizations or different? So I can see Marc nodding there. Maybe I can turn to you, Marc.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was talking about, internal communication for us. We've eliminated a lot of traditional siloed planning meetings, hour-long meetings, and we've developed these 30-minute stand-up meetings. And so, throughout the course of a given week, we have a variety of avenues to get decision-making done at what we refer to as either enabler meetings or executive sign-off meetings, right? And so gone are the days where we pull together 20-page, 30-page PowerPoint presentations and spend 40 minutes at describing a situation. And now, because we're having them weekly, you're able to go in with a 5-minute agenda item. It's more of a discussion. You have all the decision makers available on the screen as we're looking at each other now. And you could at least introduce an issue or what we refer to as a risk or an opportunity. Any of these R&O meetings happen on a weekly basis. And so as you go down the organization, they happen more frequently throughout the week. So as an example, in my team, I've gotten rid of my weekly staff meeting that was an hour and a half to now I started with 5 half-hour meetings at 8 a.m. every morning. So every morning we met as a leadership team and we went through what we had to do to get through the crisis. We've reduced that down to 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, given the stability that we're seeing. But all the other areas of, below me and above me have established the same type of criteria where we're never more than a week away from having access to the highest decision maker in the company. So as we go through this, whether it's related to order condition, to capacity, to demand planning, all of these coordinating things that usually took a week and a half or 2 weeks or sometimes a month to get through, we become much more agile because we've traded off the traditional way we did things when we were all in the office, and it feels like we've actually been more productive by being able to schedule these half-hour meetings throughout our day because we're remote. So again, I think it's another silver lining that we're learning as an organization coming out of the pandemic, that we're going to be much more agile in the decision making. And to Raman's early point about the digital transformation, as that digital information becomes more quickly available and meaningful to everybody, it makes those decision making points more and more frequent, with greater visibility to a broader section of our company, so that we don't get these things that get missed, or these opportunities or risks that hit us without some warning. So I think it's a good thing.
Susanne, I think perhaps hopefully gone are the days when every decision would have to go via Wolfsburg and through perhaps a rather Byzantine chain of command at one point. My words, not yours. But you alluded to earlier a better organization. So does this you do feel now that the decisions can be taken more quickly, reactive in that kind of way? Yeah.
So please don't tell anybody in Wolfsburg. No, but that it really is a really good and very professional coordination on a central basis, which is absolutely necessary. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we know each other, we trust each other. First thing I did when this started here in North America, I called my colleagues in China and asked them, what have you done? How have you organized everything? And I learned a lot from them, as always. So I was able to also establish these learnings here centrally, authorized from Wolfsburg, but also approved here in my region. So I feel that they are trusting us much more than before. Like Marc also said, we are much more flexible. For example, decisions about production programs, including all the board members, are happening now every month. Some were weekly in June, July, but now monthly basis, when they used to be bi-monthly, for example. And it's much more centrally because the knowledge of the market, the flexibility of our necessities here in the region are here with us. And I really feel that trust, and also, again, a big thank you for that we have been able to make decisions locally with a central coordination.
Mm. And maybe just from the logistics provider point of view, Emmanuel, again, you are a global company and pulled through many different sort of regions. So is that decision-making process streamlined or again, been empowered in key parts of the organization?
Yeah, I think this is one of the outcome that we will keep from that crisis. We have reduced considerably the levels of the level of interaction within the management before getting to the top. And I think we've been holding, just like Marc said, daily short team meetings just to ensure the agility. And also something that I can share is that we've turned the executive committee of the company to happen twice a week, plus one session which was dedicated to the strategy. And believe it or not, we've not been so productive on the strategy of the company and the implementation of the strategy of the company to turn that into real than in that period. And probably because, again, this is the hour of the confidence, because the finance guys, they found that they needed so much the business because it was a real moment where the cash was an issue for the company, that also they understood that they needed to be much more reactive, so that we can quickly influence the evolution of the strategy of the company and implement it on that unique occasion on the field. So sorry if it's a bit different answer than what you expected, but I think we learned a lot. We'll shortcut a lot the organization, and we see that today we are even more agile because we can make decisions on the spot, well instructed by the team, because people go to the essential in what they present. And I think also they have learned that they should not be afraid of proposing breakthrough ideas, because this is now more than considered. This is welcome.
Absolutely. So
if I could add something,
please.
Yeah. So there's a good theme in what Marc and Emmanuel just said. I think we are all getting the full commitment on becoming the data-driven organization. Before that, you will rely on people's gut and their body language. Now everybody's working with the same constraints. And to give an example, the demand forecasting. In my business counterparts, the machine learning is becoming an acceptable vocabulary word, because now they want to see multiple inputs. What's my customer EDI telling? How good that is? What's going on supply chain? Give me all the data points, something that I can react in real time and control the destiny that I have at my hands. So I think it is really that part, from data to insights, that journey has become much more expedited.
That's certainly, I think, a key point, especially for leaders. So we're running a little bit late on time, but I'll just try and take my prerogative as host here to just a few minutes, because we have one other question that had a lot of votes from the audience that I think is worth addressing, and perhaps as a kind of concluding point. So the question is really, given all the technological and digital change that we have, it's really, what sort of talent are you looking for to help sustain, the transformation, and even to disrupt, if you like, more organizations further? So, perhaps on the note of, in terms of looking at our teams, the sort of people that you're developing and want to grow into your organizations, what sort of talent are you looking for in that way? So we'll try and keep our answers fairly short so that we can say, but maybe if I start with you on that one, Susanne.
What talent are we looking for? Non-silo, integrative, looking for the whole picture for the good of the complete company. So not experts that are really only going in one silo, but more the global integrator.
Marc?
Look, I can only answer for how I'd like to set my team up, and I hire for enthusiasm and openness. I'm always looking for people that are enthusiastic about the work that we do. As complex and as complicated as global automotive and automotive supply chain is, we can teach the nuts and bolts. But what we found is, with such a fast-paced and fast-moving environment, and that pace getting faster and faster, is we really want people who can adapt, people who can bring an enthusiasm every day, whether we're dealing with a crisis or whether we're dealing with an opportunity, and be a positive influence for change within the organization, and not be scared to try and be innovative, and not be scared to try and change the things that we're doing. So I'm not looking for a technical skill set as much as I'm looking for that enthusiasm and the desire to make a change.
Great. So, Emmanuel, how would you characterize the talent that you're most on the hunt for right now?
I love the description of Susanne when she called for integrators. Actually, people going beyond the boundaries, people who have enough empathy and capability just to substitute themselves in the seat of the other one in front of them. Because I think with this crisis, as we talk about supply chain management, all of us, we need to understand that one is nothing without the other, and we have to understand the prerequisite of each one. And integrator is a good word for me.
Great.
And a bit of humor.
And Raman, well, and I'm sorry, I won't be getting a job at Gefco anytime soon, I'm afraid. So, Raman, maybe in the path of digital transformation, obviously as CEO, you're overseeing so much of it. Well, some technical skills, I'm sure, matter. But what is the profile of the talent you're looking for look like?
what I would say now, there's absolutely no difference between a business strategy and technology strategy. They're kind of one and the same thing. So the people that we are looking for were very comfortable speaking the business language. Now, that's to me the number one thing. No more you can be in your own silo. You have to put the context of technology as to how you can drive innovation in an enterprise. How can I cut down the cycle time for a new product development? Those are the key things that I look for. Second thing, I think Mark said, the learning adaptability, that aptitude is probably the most important because things are changing so fast. So I'm looking for people who put more focus on ROL, return on learning, as opposed to return on investment. So that's where we are.
ROL, I think that's a great place to sort of cap off our day today and in our session here. I think there was lots of universal aspects coming through there. And again, I any coders in the audience, don't dismay. I really doubt that your talents won't still be in demand on highly technical areas. But clearly, we in the supply chain, perhaps above all, that importance of integrating, looking across silos, looking across departments, being able to work across the business is really so essential to this. And I think those are messages which came across really loud and clear. We'll wrap up this panel. I really want to thank Raman, Susanne, Marc, Emmanuel. Really fantastic insight. There were other questions we couldn't get through from our audience, but we'll put them to you. We really hope you'll continue to engage with our audience via the networking and other tools available there. And of course, we'll continue to stay in touch. But thanks so much to each and all of you for your time and insight here. And for our audience tuning in, this is the last session of the content for the day, but the conference even for today is hardly closed. So one is that the networking carries on, the functions stay available. So please continue to use the matchmaking, set up meetings. Obviously, in North America, there's still plenty of time in the day. It's perhaps a bit late in France to do this, but I'm sure people will still be flexible and open. So continue to do and engage that. And also, our content from today will all be posted online. Some of it already is, which is on demand. Much of the rest of it will be finished by tonight, UK time. So for those of you who've missed anything, check back. You can watch more tomorrow. Go onto the Umbrella schedule, just click view past content. All the content will be available to you then. So do take the time to view, and it will be available to all of you for at least 30 days here on this platform. So you can binge watch, as I say, this Friday night. I mean, who would do anything else? But you'll also have some time to go back and enjoy it at your leisure. And I would, I'm sure you'll recommend this session to your colleagues because it was a real standout. We do kick off our content again live tomorrow, 8 a.m. UK time. I appreciate that might be a little bit early for some of you in North America, but hey, if you're staying up through the night, then catch us in the morning on the morning circuit. We're going to kick off talking about sustainability, looking in particular at aspects of the European Green Deal, the implications for the supply chain, and across that. And we've got a whole slew of content coming through tomorrow and on Thursday. So keep the schedule and keep up with us. We're really looking forward to joining. Don't forget as well to visit the e-booth of our sponsor. So thanks to all of you for the day. Hope you'll catch up on more content this evening and into tomorrow as well. We'll be here and on hand for any other questions you need. Have a great rest of the day, evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.